of course, as an engineer and a mathematician, and it looks like you've come from that sort of angle in trying to reach out to see if you can they fit? Can religion and science go together? And this is the great debate: faith and science, or religion and science.
Yes.
People seem to think they are very different things, and they can't be compatible. Tell us a little bit about the inspiration to the book, and I guess that's going to be the next question. Religion and science, I mean, are they compatible?
But really, the book was inspired by some work of Fr Stanley Jaki. So Fr Jaki was a Benedictine priest, a Hungarian origin. He was a member of the Pontifical Academy of Sciences, and he died in 2009. But he had many insights, but one of the insights he had was that I'm going to put this in technical terms and then explain it later, but that science and natural theology have the same epistemological structure. In other words, they approach reality in the same way. So when you do science, you've got to believe that the data of the senses is real, and then you apply the law of causality. And exactly the same thing happens with something like metaphysics, where you try to prove the existence of God based on reason alone. So you believe the reality of the things outside of you, and then you try to find a causally adequate answer for why they exist. And you come to the only effective explanation that's sufficient is that there is an immaterial God who is sustaining things in existence at every moment. So the fact that the way you approach science and the way you approach natural theology is fundamentally the same indicates to us that not only are they not compatible, but they're fundamentally have the same reasoning process.
Interesting.
Yes.
So we would say then, what the critics who see good religion or good science does look at these truths as I mean you're looking at metaphysical. Can you explain what that is? What is metaphysics, and what are these types of sciences?
Yeah, so metaphysics is that branch of philosophy that tries to say, what are the laws for reality as such? If a thing is existing, what must hold true for it by the fact that it exists? So metaphysics tries to say, what are those laws? For instance, the principle of non-contradiction. If a thing exists, it can't not exist at the same time, or it can't not be what it is at the same time. Yeah, that's absolutely impossible. It's impossible for anything to exist and not exist at the same time. That's a law of reality, hard-coded into reality.
Yes.
So the fact that both religion and what I do in my book is what I say: if you observe that basic approach of towards reality, where you accept the data of your senses and you accept these principles, these basic principles of logic and reasoning, then you will find religion and science are compatible. They're completely compatible. There's no conflict between the two. But if you divert from that way of approaching reality, which is the realist way, it's called, it's the epistemology called realism. If you divert from that, then you will fall into irrationality in religion and science. And I look in the history in the past, and I see certain religions have deviated from this way of approaching reality, this having the wrong theory of knowledge. And also I look at some aspects of modern science, where modern scientists themselves are sort of violating the canons of their own science and falling into irrationality for the same reason. And that's where the incompatibility comes from. But if they just stuck to that common sense approach to reality, there's absolutely no conflict.
So that explains my next question: the realist guide. Who are these realists you're talking about?
Yes.
And so I noticed in the book, and even on the front cover, you've got these angles. And what I love is you've got these gauges of you go one extreme or the other, or can you explain a little bit what you've done? You've got all these little graphics. Yes, there are pictures in this book, those who are listening, and we always like pictures, but they're quite interesting. And you've got a lot of these throughout the book. And
yes,
can you explain what the idea behind that is?
So
it's a great way to.
As you see, in the discussion, the brief discussion we've had, this is quite sort of heady stuff, and it's very intellectual. And one of the major challenges I had in writing the book was, how do I make what I'm trying to explain more understandable for the reader. And so I came up with this meter, which I call the epistodometer. And so what I say is that if you have that perfectly common sense balanced view of reality, which is called realism, then effectively reality will be very lightsome for you. You'll be able to penetrate reality and make sense of it. But if you deviate from it on one side or the other, if you either reject the data of your senses, okay, this table's not real, I don't know if it's real, or what have you, or you reject those principles of non-contradiction or the principle of identity or what have you, then things will be very confusing and you'll fall into irrationality. So I use this as a way as tracking sort of intellectual balance.
Yes.
And so the main thrust of the book is you've got to have that balance, that intellectual balance, if you're going to have religion and science compatible, and also if you're going to avoid taking really extreme positions that effectively I claim would be irrational positions.
Okay.
How does an idealist fit into that bar you've got there?
So the idealist would be someone who would take some idea that is, I don't know, they find very enchanting, all right, but they haven't necessarily taken it from reality. And then they'll try to take that idea and sort of impose it on reality, regardless of what the data of reality is telling them. You know, so I take the example of the fundamentalists who try to say that the Earth is only 6,000 years old. You know, so we have a lot of information from science, empirical evidence from the senses, from geology and from astronomy, that the universe is much, much older than 6,000 years, and the Earth is much, much older than 6,000 years. But they've got this idea, this beautiful idea, that it had been created in a 144-hour period 6,000 years ago. And so that's the only thing that can be true for them. And regardless of what the empirical data says, they refuse that data.